In today's video, I want to take a look at some pretty significant NHL rumors of things we might see happen during the 2019 NHL offseason. The points we're covering today is Taylor Hall in New Jersey. He could be due for an extension, or could he be traded? We also want to take a look at Artemi Panarin and some potential destinations where he may end up. Plus, I also want to take a look at the Vegas Golden Knights salary cap situation, and could William Karlsson or others be on the way out due to the cap crunch? And finally, I want to take a look at Tampa Bay Lightning head coach Jon Cooper. As well as he's done, and as much as that team has won a lot during his tenure, he does not have a contract beyond this season, and there is some talk about his future. We'll get into all that coming up next. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. If you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. We review and discuss all 31 NHL teams, so if you're a huge hockey fan, consider subscribing and clicking the bell so you don't miss anything. I want to take a look at some of the more significant things that we might see happen during the 2019 NHL offseason. I think there's going to be all kinds of changes, whether that be through free agency. We have some big-time mega RFA contracts that teams need to take care of. I think there's going to be lots of trades, obviously new coaches coming on board. I just think it's going to be a very hectic time with all kinds of news to discuss, and these are some of the things that we might be seeing heading into that time of year. Now let's get started here with the Tampa Bay Lightning and their head coach, Jon Cooper. Now, of course, Jon Cooper is a terrific NHL head coach and has had nothing but success with that franchise since he took over from Guy Boucher a number of years ago. Obviously, Tampa did miss the playoffs a couple of years back, but in my opinion, that was mainly due to some pretty significant injuries. Stamkos was out for a big chunk of the year, didn't play a whole lot. Even goaltender Ben Bishop, who was their starting goalie at the time, missed some key times of the season as well. And if it wouldn't have been for some pretty significant injuries there, I think they would have made the playoffs and likely would have made some noise in the playoffs as well. I mean, obviously right now they're having a pretty significantly record-breaking season here. Could be one of the best seasons on NHL history. They don't seem to have a ton of competition in the Eastern Conference right now, so hopefully we'll see what they can do in the playoffs. They're definitely the odds-on favorite for the Stanley Cup. But there's some talk around Jon Cooper in his time with Tampa. Is this a scenario we might see where it's like Stanley Cup or bust type of scenario with him in his future as the head coach of that franchise? Now, Jon Cooper does not have a contract beyond this season, which is generating all the talk and buzz around him and whether or not he'll be back next year. Obviously, teams like Tampa appreciate a good coach when they have one, but of course, like anything, they do have a shelf life, and at some point in time, if they're not winning Stanley Cups, that's the ultimate goal, and sometimes they need a new voice, a new direction, a new leader to help take them there. And I guess if they happen to have an early exit in this year's playoffs, could that possibly be the case here with Cooper? As of right now, there's no firm speculation suggesting that there's a pretty good chance that he wouldn't be back if they don't win the Cup or something like that. But there is a lot of talk around the fact that he does not have an extension in place. So when obviously, just like players, when there's no contract in place, you can't help but wonder what's going to happen. I mean, we've seen last year the Washington Capitals win the Stanley Cup with head coach Barry Trotz, and even then his contract was expiring as well. They didn't opt to extend him, and of course he ended up leaving. But of course they already had their succession plan probably in mind. It seems as though the Capitals were already kind of leaning towards giving the job to Todd Reirden even before that came to be. At least that's what a lot of people seem to think at this point. Does it seem crazy to think that Coach Jon Cooper might not be back next year behind the Tampa Bay Lightning bench? Or do you think more than likely they're waiting to see how the playoff run goes here and how successful they are before deciding on his future? If Tampa has an early playoff exit, could we see a change in head coach next year? Now I want to quickly jump over and take a quick look at Artemi Panarin, of course, the pending unrestricted free agent with the Columbus Blue Jacket. Has had nothing but speculation around him really for the entire year ever since training camp began. We've made it through the NHL trade deadline, and Panarin is still a member of the Blue Jackets, so obviously he will be to the end of the season. Now, there's been all kinds of talk about the Florida Panthers wanting to bring in Panarin as well as goaltender Sergei Bobrovsky, and that there was some talk about maybe making a trade before the deadline. Obviously, that never happened, but the more likely scenario that many seem to think would happen was that the Panthers would go after each of them over the course of the offseason when they're both going to be unrestricted free agents. We saw the Panthers kind of move some players out, freeing up some salary cap space. There was some more speculation around the fact that they very well might be even looking to move even more out. Like a Mike Hoffman, for example, had a lot of rumors around him. So I guess time will tell how hard the Panthers go after these guys during the offseason, but they appear not to be the only team in play. I've seen it reported from many NHL insiders indicating that they'd be super surprised on July the 1st if the New York Rangers don't show up with Artemi Panarin here with a big bag of money saying, come play for us. They really want to accelerate that rebuild and are probably prepared to offer him a mega contract to bring him to the Big Apple. Obviously, Bobrovsky and Panarin have kept things pretty tight-lipped outside of the fact that they didn't want to get into their futures with the Columbus Blue Jackets beyond this season. That's really all we know, is that they're more than likely going to head into free agency and more than likely going to end up wearing a different jersey next year. But where they end up, we don't know. But many seem to think that the Rangers will be making a big push here for Panarin, so don't count them out of the equation here. Obviously, the Panthers are going to be big-time players for his services too, but he's certainly going to have plenty of options, and both teams are likely going to be offering him big bucks to come play for their franchise. Now, speaking of players being offered big bucks, the big question mark here around Taylor Hall and the New Jersey Devils remains, will they offer him a big mega extension to stay with the New Jersey Devils this summer? He is heading into the final year of his current contract and is 1 year away from being an unrestricted free agent. So will Taylor Hall pony up here and sign long-term with New Jersey? Or will he decide to ride that out and head into free agency like we've seen a lot of the other top young players in the NHL do here recently? I mean, many of these guys have kind of decided that it's their right to go to free agency and that they don't automatically want to re-sign with their existing franchise. They want to see what else is out there. At the same time, they can continue to bet on themselves that they're going to continue to produce and put up big numbers to kind of enhance what they're being offered. Now, when it comes to Taylor Hall, obviously, I'm sure the New Jersey Devils want to keep him. There was some talk around the trade deadline. Would they consider trading him? Because obviously, it's going to depend here on what he's going to want for a contract. Now, if they have trouble coming to terms and they get further into July and it's a case where he's not signed, could they consider moving him? Now, there's also some talk as well, if the Devils can't get him signed around July 1st or shortly thereafter when the window opens up that they can begin negotiations, they might consider trading him, as a lot of teams are very much in a situation that they don't want to see themselves in, like the Islanders were with John Tavares. Really, ever since that signing, there's been a lot more talk around teams kind of preparing themselves to trade players instead of risk losing them for nothing. Now, we saw the Blue Jackets take a different approach at the trade deadline this year, and I guess we'll see how that pans out. I personally don't have a ton of confidence in what they did, but I guess we'll see if they can prove me wrong here. And if they can not only get into the playoffs, which is not a guarantee, but make some noise and go deep on a playoff run, it would be great for the franchise. But I guess we will see if the guys they acquired are what they really needed to make that happen or not. But there's certainly a lot of question marks around Taylor Hall. Many seem to think that the odds of him signing in New Jersey are really good. There's no reason to believe at this point that he wants out or that he's definitely going to free agency. But at the same time, you can't help but wonder here if the Devils are going to consider making a trade to make sure that they get back some good assets for him if they don't think they can get him signed. Obviously, New Jersey had a big comeback year last year, getting to the playoffs. This year, they've certainly faltered. They're not going to be a playoff team this year. They're going to be in the lottery here yet again. But at the same time, Taylor Hall's missed some pretty significant amount of time after being the Hart Trophy winner, a season before. He certainly had a disappointing year this year. So I would say he's likely going to be out to reprove himself again next year and show he can still play at that level, but he's going to need some help in New Jersey. That's a big part of the issue here. He didn't have enough help surrounding him, in my opinion, to really make big strides with his franchise. They probably overachieved a bit last year, and likely we're going to take a step back this year anyways. But let me know down in the comments what you think of Taylor Hall and his future with the New Jersey Devils. Are we going to see a long-term contract? Are we going to see the Devils possibly consider trading Hall? Or do neither happen this offseason and he goes into the final year of his deal with New Jersey and kind of plays it out and sees what happens here? And then Taylor Hall might be one of the guys we're talking about next year at the trade deadline, depending on how their season goes and how his performance is going as well. Now, last but not least here, I want to take a look at the Vegas Golden Knights and their salary cap situation and whether or not they can really afford to keep many of their players coming back next year, and if William Karlsson might be the odd man out. After we saw the big trade between the Vegas Golden Knights and the Ottawa Senators where they acquired Mark Stone and then almost immediately inked him to an 8-year contract extension at $9.5 million with a full no-trade clause for the entire 8 years, that really ate up a lot of their remaining salary cap situation. And really, as of right now, going into next year, really don't have a lot of salary cap space here yet at all. Now let's take a look here at the projected cap space from Cap Friendly up on the screen. As you can see right now, there's really no room to really sign any players. They're going to have to make some room here to keep what they have. Now, keep in mind, they also have other pending restricted free agents and unrestricted free agents that the Vegas Golden Knights have on their roster right now. Restricted free agents, they have forwards Pierre-Edouard Bellemare, they have Brandon Peary and Ryan Carpenter. They also have defenseman Derek Englund. Now, Bellemare and Englund have done great with the Vegas Golden Knights since they've been there. They're certainly two of their leaders. They're a little bit older, with Englund being 36, Bellemare being 34. I do think the odds would be decent that Vegas could probably re-sign them on a short-term deal for not a ton of money, so they should be able to retain retain them. But then you got a guy like Brandon Peary who's done nothing but score, but seems to struggle to find himself a regular permanent NHL home and really be a regular for an extended period of time. So he's going to be looking for a little bit of a guaranteed contract here to kind of get him some regular playing time over the next few years. I mean, he's 27 years old. He's done relatively well. It just seems kind of odd. He's had a really hard time kind of sticking in one spot in the NHL here so far. So he's going to be looking, for a little bit of job security as well. So they don't have just William Karlsson to think about. Plus, they have some other RFAs besides William Karlsson as well. They also have goaltender Malcolm Subban and forward Thomas Nosek. And obviously, all of these guys that we talked about here, whether they're UFA or RFA, are likely all going to want some kind of a raise. They all kind of earn different amounts depending on their individual performances. But they've certainly all played, relatively well. A lot of guys that they've signed long-term here as well. Not only did they do the Mark Stone contract this year, but they get Max Pacioretty locked up for relatively longer term as well. They signed Paul Stastny last year. It's not a super long-term deal, but he's under contract for the next few years as well. So those three guys play together as a line, and they're all under contract for, anywhere from 3 to 8 years, depending on the player. Of course, you got, besides William Karlsson, you got Riley Smith and Jonathan Marchessault, who have signed longer-term deals as well. Of course, Karlsson, after his mega performance in a breakout season last year, signed a 1-year deal at $5.25 million. And, obviously as a restricted RFA, they're not going to be able to go below that. But based on his performance this year and the production being down, he's on pace for around 20 to 23 goals, something like that. And probably going to be around 45 to 50 points, but certainly is a fair bit lower than last year, which is kind of expected after the breakout year he had. You couldn't help but wonder if Wild Bill could contain that. Of course, this year, like I said, I've kind of teased him a little bit, called him Mild Bill. He has been a little bit more milder for sure, but still, overall, considering where he was at in his career before he came to Vegas, it's still pretty impressive, and there's still no reason why he can't be a solid top 6 forward for Vegas or wherever he may end up here. Also under contract long-term include forward Alex Tuch, goalie Marc-Andre Fleury, and their top 4 defensemen, including Shea Theodore, Nate Schmidt, Colin Miller, and Braden McNabb. So they have a lot of guys that they've really committed to here for a long period of time. And with that lack of cap space, can they actually bring Karlsson back, or are they going to have to shed some other bodies here to make that happen? I'm sure their preference right now would be to keep Karlsson, and at this point, I don't really know if he's really earned much of a raise on that $5.25 million, but considering his performance has come down some. So even if they can offer him the same or very comparable money, they still need to find room to be able to do that. Now, there's been some talk that other forwards like a Cody Eakin or a Ryan Reeves might be considered trade bait. I mean, I don't imagine they'd want to trade Ryan Reeves. He certainly plays a big role in that team in a lot of other capacities. Considering the interest that was in him when he was a free agent the year before, I don't think they'd have any trouble trading him, but not really sure that they're going to get that big of a return to really make that much of a difference. They'd probably be looking at getting some draft picks because they need to free up cap space. If they trade any of these guys, they really can't take much back for roster players. So you're looking at prospects or draft picks, but the return would have to be. There's also been some talk around Erik Haula as well. Of course, Haula's been injured for a big part of this season, so there's certainly some question marks around his future. He's not signed as longer term as well. I believe he's got 1 more year in his deal after this one. So there's certainly another player that possibly could be moved this offseason to make room for William Karlsson. But the other thing that they can possibly look at doing would be to trading the David Clarkson contract. Obviously, during Vegas's initial startup here, they took on the David Clarkson contract to help bring them up in salary, and they no longer need that. Now they need to shed some salary, so they could look at moving that as well to kind of free up some extra cap space to a team who's maybe needing to struggle a little bit to get to the salary cap floor. We've seen the Coyotes make moves like that on a number of occasions, and of course, with all the cut and payroll, we may even see a team like Ottawa need to do that as well. So, of course, that's going to come at a price, though. They're not going to take that contract without getting another asset that's much, a good asset, like a nice prospect or some draft picks or something. They're going to have to give up something in order to dump that as well. So I guess they do have some other options here besides trading active players on the roster. But either way, Vegas has spent so much money on some of these other guys they brought in. They are going to have some very tough decisions next year. They're not the only team. We know we talk about a lot about the Leafs and even the Winnipeg Jets, Tampa Bay. But Vegas is yet another team that has a lot of hard decisions when it comes to the salary cap, and they don't have really that much wiggle room. I mean, a guy like Karlsson either stays or he goes, or they make some other guys go to make room for Karlsson. Either way, They're going to be busy, and it's just a matter of they decide to bring back Wild Bill Karlsson, see if he can get back to his wild ways here. Let me know down in the comments, what do you think the Vegas Golden Knights do to handle their salary cap crunch here? They're only a couple years into existence, and they've already spent to the max here for next year, and they do have to make some room to bring back Karlsson or replace these other guys or whatever they do. They have more salary committed than they do players on a roster to fill it out, so they have some very tough decisions to make for next season. If you're new to the channel here, I hope you consider subscribing. We cover all 31 NHL teams, and there's plenty of content here for all hockey fans to enjoy. So if you're new, hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up before you go. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you very much for watching, everybody. We will catch you next time.